Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another episode of Financial Freedom by 40. My name's Kelly, and if you haven't come across us before, just to give a bit of background, we're a Kiwi family of four who are about to embark on a journey around Australia in a caravan. And so, in today's episode, I wanted to talk a bit about our initial trip planning and what we did to be able to come up with a bit of an idea around how we're going to travel around Australia for 12 months, and actually even just talking a little bit about how we came up with the plan for 12 months. So you can see probably behind me, we have a map of Australia, and that was a big part in our initial trip planning. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about the timing of the trip and how we planned that out, a bit about where we're starting and how we decided to start in one particular location. And yeah, I'll just run you through in general how we got started planning the trip. We're going to do a more detailed itinerary run through shortly in a few episodes time, because we're still working on the final, more detailed itinerary to take us the whole way around Australia. And once we've got that finalized, we thought that would be helpful to do a more detailed run through of that. And I think we'll probably also do a much more detailed run through of everything once we get to the end, because then we will have been to all the places and we'll be able to give you a really good idea about what we went to that we enjoy, what we didn't enjoy, what worked and what didn't work, and how all of the timing actually, planned out in real life. So stay tuned for that, and also make sure you keep checking in regularly, because we are going to be sharing regular episodes as we travel around Australia and talk a little bit about all the places that we're going and the things that we're doing. So for anyone else who is wanting to plan a trip, then make sure you subscribe and you'll be able to get all of those updates on YouTube. I've got some notes I'm going to refer to because I don't want to ramble. So forgive me if I'm looking down at my notes. So, how did we initially come up with the idea? Well, we talked a little bit about that in our first episode. So, if you want the detailed rundown of all of that, make sure you go back and watch the first episode of this series. But basically, how we came up with the idea was that. How we came up with the idea to travel around Australia in a caravan was that post COVID, we had this feeling that we needed something to change. We're a bit tired of being stuck in our own country. Just this feeling, I guess, a bit of the Groundhog Day kind of feeling where we're having the same things over and over every day, getting up, taking the kids to school, getting ready for work, going to work, then there's the weekends, sort of that monotonous day in, day out. And we wanted to shake things up a little bit. And yeah, and so we were looking to maybe get a caravan and start doing a bit more traveling around our own country in the weekends and school holidays and that kind of thing. And when we were doing the research into caravans, we came across some families on Instagram who were traveling full time around Australia. And we thought, wow, that's really amazing. And that we would like to do something like that as well. So, traveling around Australia has been something that has been on the bucket list for a while, but now has just been a really good time for us to do that. Our kids are at the right age. We're in a good position financially to be able to do this. And so it's time for us to take this leap. So yeah, if you want more detail about how we went through the thinking process to start this trip, make sure you go back and watch that first episode where we talk more about that. And so then, of course, once we had this idea, it's great to have these ideas, but then we had to sort of think about, well, this is a really cool opportunity, but is it something that is feasible for us? Is it feasible to pull the kids out of school for a year? Is it feasible to take the time out from work? Is it feasible to leave our home and our business and all of that behind to take this time off to travel as a family? So there were a lot of things to consider. Obviously, one of the big things was to think about whether we could actually afford to do this. So we had to have a real solid think about how we were going to fund the trip and whether we could afford to do it at this point in time. And ultimately, obviously, we decided that it's something that we could do. Really, I guess it was kind of the case of could we afford not to do it, because our boys are growing up so fast. I know if you're a parent, you probably feel this. The time you just blink and the time has gone by. It doesn't feel like that long since they were babies, and now they're 10 and 12. And before we know it, they're probably going to be 18 and 20, and then ready to fly the nest. And so we felt like now is a good opportunity to make this investment into spending quality time with them while they're still young. Um, Another thing people have asked us about is how will it affect our financial freedom goals? And I guess it's a bit of an unknown at the moment. Of course, there's a big cost to do this. We are borrowing the money to fund the purchase of the caravan and the car. So there's going to be obviously an interest cost of that. But we will sell the caravan and the vehicle probably at the end. We're still umming and ahhing about whether we do that. But we thought that was a worthwhile investment to put that money up to pay that interest. So yes, it's likely to put us back in terms of our financial freedom goals a little bit. But the really cool thing that we thought about it is that it's going to give us an opportunity to really stretch ourselves to test what we're capable of, to get to know ourselves a bit better, and to figure out, where to from here, how we can work towards getting rid of that feeling that, of Groundhog Day, and maybe explore growing our property business a bit more so that we can hit that financial freedom goal in the next few years. So might not be financial freedom by 40, but maybe financial freedom by 45 or something along those lines. We're still exploring that. And the other thing too we thought is that, in terms of traveling, getting a bit off topic here, but in terms of traveling like this, it'll give us an opportunity to see how we can live a bit differently. Living in a caravan, obviously, we'll have a lot less possessions with us. We won't have our house. For a long time, we've been thinking about buying a bigger house or building a bigger house, but obviously, from the financial point of view, that then leaves us with a bigger mortgage, and kind of takes away from the freedom goal, if you want. So it'll give us a lot to think about over the next year or so while we're traveling, and see, get a better feel for really what we want for in life, and how we can further pursue those financial freedom goals. And as some of you might know, if you've followed us for a while, we've been exploring for a while different ways to add income streams and that kind of thing. And we feel like maybe the trip will give us an opportunity to explore some of those things, like adding online income streams, hopefully through this YouTube channel if we get enough subscribers and viewers, and other things too, like digital products and those kind of things that we'll get to explore while we're doing this. So that's probably a bit off topic, but it's just kind of where we're sitting at. So in terms of the planning, coming back to the planning, we decided that a year would be around about the right amount of time. We'd initially thought, in our initial planning, we got this map and we planned out sort of seasonally. So one of the things that affects your travel in Australia quite a bit, I just moved to the side, is the seasons. So along the top of Australia, it gets very, very hot during the summer. So it's not ideal to travel along the Northern Territory over the summer. But also it can get quite cold along the bottom over the winter. And so we wanted to factor that in. There's some things that happen at certain seasons, or certain times of the year. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to see the whale sharks, go snorkeling with the whale sharks. That's like a big thing on our bucket list of things to do during this trip. And so that happens around about sort of June, July, August, up the Western Australia, near the sort of near where this blue line on the map is. It's a little bit south of there, but that we wanted to make sure we fit that in, and we're there for the right time to make sure we get that opportunity in. So there's some sort of key items that we wanted to make sure we fit in. And as we started to plan it out, we thought, well, 18 months would probably be ideal, because then we'd also get the opportunity to go visit Tasmania. I'm just realizing this is back to front on my screen, so I'm not sure what it'll look like for you. But so we sort of took the map and started, and you can maybe see we've got months roughly on there. So this is sort of still a bit of a rough plan that we put on the map. We knew that we wanted to be in the centre of Australia around about July, because it's otherwise can be very, very hot. So when we go to Uluru and Alice Springs, that area around there, we wanted to be there in the middle of the year. So those are some of the factors that we took in. And we had hoped to go to Tasmania, but as we mentioned in the first episode, Ryan has 12 months of leave without pay. And so we decided that 12 months was really the ideal period to stick to, because he can work within that 12 months leave from work. And it worked out quite nicely in terms of timing for the boys with school and that kind of thing. So we stuck with a year. At this stage, we think that will mean that we won't be able to get to Tasmania, though we are hoping that maybe we can squeeze it in once we've finished our more detailed trip planning, but we'll update you on that when we come to the more detailed itinerary video. So to give you a bit of a close-up of our initial travel plan, as you can see, hopefully from this one, we've got the months on. So our starting point is here in Brisbane. And a lot of the reason for that was that we had family there, but also the Caravan dealership that we chose is in Brisbane as well. And it worked out quite well in terms of our timing with our seasons and that kind of thing as well. So Brisbane is our starting point, and then we're going fairly quickly along the east coast of Australia. Part of the reason for that is that places like Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and also Adelaide, you can fly in fairly easily from New Zealand. And so we figured those main centres we won't spend too long in, so we'll go quite quickly. We might slow it down a little bit from what we had here once we've done our more detailed itinerary. So as you can see at the moment, we've got sort of, what's that, about 7 weeks between Brisbane and roughly Melbourne, just outside of Melbourne. So that's the start of the trip. So that's going to go fairly quickly. Then we've allowed around about a month around about this area here. So a little bit of time in Adelaide. My 40th birthday will be around about there, and Christmas will be around about there. But there's these 2 little peninsulas in here, which have quite a lot of sights to see, quite a lot of cool parks and that kind of thing. So we're going to spend a little bit of time around there. That's the Eyre Peninsula, the wider one, and right now the name of the other one escapes me, but it's just there above Kangaroo Island, which we're also hoping to hop over to as well. And then if we work our way along here is what is known as the Nullarbor. So we'll spend not much time there, go fairly quickly through the area. We've allowed a week, you can see there. And then that'll take us over to this area here around the bottom of Western Australia. So there's quite a lot to see around there, I think, based off, I've done quite a lot of the detailed planning around this area, and now we've added a bit more time in around there, I think, because there's quite a lot to see here between Esperance and Perth. So have expanded the time there, I think, and so you'll see that when we do a more detailed video. Then heading up the coast, one of the places we wanted to spend a lot of time in is the area around partly around Monkey Mare around here, and then also up here where you can see Exmouth, that little peninsula that you can see there. I'll try and point to it. It doesn't have it marked on here, but along here is the Ningaloo coast, and so we've that's where we're going to go do the whale sharks. That's where there's a lot of amazing snorkeling and boating, and so we're going to spend a lot of time there. Then we're going to head north. So heading north up here is Dampier Peninsula. There's quite a lot of neat things to see around there. And then the Gib is in this area up here. So the Gib Road is a popular route that we wanted to make sure we did, a 4-wheel drive track. Can be quite hard on caravans, but and equipment, vehicles, but we want to do it. It's one thing a lot of the caravanning families do, so we've allowed time for that in there. Then heading up towards Darwin, we were going to originally try and get across to Arnhem Land, but that is probably not going to happen now. We're going to take that month and move it sort of back in further down around Western Australia and Southern Australia or South Australia, because we want to make the most of that time, and up there around Arnhem Land is a bit more remote, a bit more difficult to access, and that you need permits and the like. Then coming down to the centre of Australia, where obviously we're going to go see Uluru and lots of the other neat sites around there. We had originally thought we might do the, I don't even know how you say it properly, but Oodnadatta track. I think we probably won't do that now, but we'll see how we go when we get to our more detailed planning. Then heading up towards Cape York. So this is the northernmost point of Australia. So we will get up there. A bit of work still to do around that part. That's towards the end of our trip, but a bit more complicated to get the caravan up there. So that may be the point when we need to get ourselves some swag or a rooftop tent. Then coming back down again, and then ending back down in Brisbane again to finish up the trip. So that hopefully gives you a bit more insight into the map and how we're going to go with our rough plan, and then we'll go through the more detailed plan once we've finished that. one of the things that has really hit us in terms of planning this trip is the scale. I mean, Australia is huge. I think we figured out that it's something like 27 times larger than New Zealand. So when you look on the map and you start thinking, oh, we might go from there to there on the map, and you might think, okay, well, that's not that far, but it might be something like 20 hours of driving time. So we realized very quickly the distances were big. And so the planning was going to be really crucial. We can't, we've got two kids. Obviously, if you're a parent, you'll understand you can't just drive for hours and hours and hours on with kids in the car, or they'll go mental and you'll all go mental. So we had to factor that element into the planning. So what we did from here, once we had the map and we had our rough ideas, we planned out the dates for the key events of things that we know we want to get to make sure those are factored in our trip timeline. And then what we've done is we've got this. Well, we've done a lot of research watching on YouTube, watching other travelers and seeing where they're going. So we've picked up a lot of places that we added into an app called WikiCamps. And so we have this app. I think it's WikiCamps. Let me just double check. We've got a couple of them. So the one we're using, yeah, is WikiCamps. It shows all the campsites, but it also has a lot of tourist destinations on it. So you can go in there and you can add them all to your planner. And what it does, if I just load it up, it gives you a map and it gives you a line. And it's not perfect. Like it's got some glitchy things, and we still haven't sort of finalized our itinerary. So there are lines on the maps that sort of go backwards and forwards all over the place. But it gives you the ability to go through, and I'll just load it up. So you can hopefully see there's the app. So Rainbow Beach is somewhere that we visited just recently when we did a trip, and a little interim trip over to Australia to prepare. And so if I zoom out, you can sort of see like the green lines are lines to different places that we want to visit. So we've gone through and we've added lots of sites in. And then it's done this line. The squiggly line is not really accurate. We're not going to be zigzagging backwards and forwards, but this allowed us to go through and pop in sites of interest. So if I go zoom in here, there's obviously something down here that's of interest to us that we've saved on there, like a location. So you can click on these little things. Like let me click on one and I'll show you. So um, there's a site of interest here. So you can see like this one, it's like Little Blue Lake in South Australia. So it gives you a picture, it gives you a rating of how other people have rated it in the app. And so then we'd go through and we'd save all of these things into the app. We've saved camps into the app, and it's sort of given us a bit of a way to store information when we're watching videos on YouTube or reading books about Australia, and saving all of that into there. And that's been really helpful. And then to go back afterwards, and in the next video, I'll show you how I've used the information from that and from other sources to be able to come up with a much more detailed itinerary for our trip. Um, we talked a little bit in the last episode about managing work. So when we started our initial trip planning, we were both working. When we came up with the idea about the middle of last year, we both had jobs. Since then, I left my job towards the end of last year, and so that took that out of the factor. So we were thinking, well, could I continue my work? I had a fairly flexible work arrangement. Could I continue my work while we were traveling? But that work came to an end, and so that was no longer an issue. So my focus since then has been on trying to grow the socials for this page, and hopefully in some we'll be able to monetize this page in some way so that we can help fund our travels through that. Of course, as I mentioned, Ryan's had 12 months of leave without pay, so he had to go through the process of applying to work to get that approved. And thankfully, they were really supportive of him taking that time. But obviously, that would have been a factor in our ability to do this, as well as being able to take that time off work to be able to travel. So that had to be something we considered very early on in our planning. And then we sort of thought quite seriously about how it would impact our kids and whether now was the right time to do that in terms of their schooling, or whether we did it when they were a little bit older. We'd always wanted to do some travel with them, but the question was whether we do it now while they're still in primary school, or whether we waited until they were in those early years at high school. So we sort of thought maybe we could do something like this when they were 13, 14, before they started the important exams at school. But yeah, everything kind of just aligned quite nicely with me leaving my job and their age and stage, and everything just sort of fell into place right now. So that worked out really well. In terms of other things, just in terms of managing our home and our business. So we own our own home, as we mentioned previously. We're going to Airbnb that, and our property business can be taken care of by property managers. So that makes our life a little bit easier. So in terms of the feasibility, those things weren't too much of a barrier. Um, the thing that probably has held me back a lot at the start was the fact that we have a cat. We have an elderly cat, so that was a big thing that played on my mind about her and how we were going to cope with that situation when it came to us leaving. Thankfully, my mum is a big cat lover and she was able to step in and say that she will take her. But we're sort of going to see how that plays out because she is very, very old and she hasn't been doing so great lately. So we do have, we're very fortunate in that mum said she would take her. That was a year ago when we started first, or over a year ago now, when we started first talking about that. But we're just going to sort of have to see how she goes over the next couple of months because she hasn't been doing the greatest lately. So if all goes well, then she'll be off to my mum's, and we can tell you a bit more about that and how that goes after that. After we go through that. So what else? I think I've covered a lot of those things. So initially, so deciding how to fund the trip. So talking a bit more about the funding. So the funding was obviously a pretty big factor in what to do and basically, or whether we could do it. And basically, our thinking was that we would sell one of our rental properties to fund this. Unfortunately, the property market is still not the greatest here in New Zealand. And so if you're from here, you'll be well aware of how that's going. We did try and put a property on the market a couple of years ago to free up some cash, and it just didn't move at the price we wanted it to. And since then, things have gotten worse in terms of the prices in that area. We do have a neighbour who's interested in buying it, but or buying one of the properties, but he can't buy at the price that we need to get to make it work for us. So we felt like at the moment the property market has dropped off so much that it's just not worth selling and potentially losing quite a significant amount of money compared to what we would get if we just waited another maybe year or so to sell that property. That the cost of the interest and borrowing the money to fund the caravan and the car will be far less than the difference between what the property is worth now and what it was worth maybe 2 years ago. And so we're hoping to get it to recover to back to what the market looked like a couple of years ago, and then we'll sell it, and that will well and truly cover the costs of the interest and probably a lot of the other costs that we will incur during this trip. So that's where we're sitting at in terms of the funding. But in the meantime, we have access to funds to be able to, fund the trip and pay for the vehicles. I guess the other thing too to factor in was sort of telling our family and friends. We weren't too sure how everybody would take it, but for the most part, I think most people have been really supportive. I think a few have been a bit surprised and a bit, I don't know, maybe concerned about going to Australia, given the I guess there's a lot of extremes compared to New Zealand. So, bushfires, snakes, spiders, things that want to sting you and eat you and those kind of things. So, my parents, I think, have some concerns around that. But apart from that, most people have been really supportive and said, oh my gosh, I wish we could do that too. So, feel really positive about how people have reacted around doing that. Then, what else have we got? In terms of just general planning, if you're looking at resources to plan a trip like that, like this, so one of the big things we've done is to do a lot of reading. So I think I checked out every state of Australia Lonely Planet book from the library. That was really helpful, just going through all of the sites in there. As I said, wiki camps. I've sort of just gone through wiki camps and looked at places that had good ratings, watching lots of YouTube channels. So some of the ones we mentioned in the first video was Alnick Adventures. So they're amazing. Their videos are really good, and they share a lot about the places they go. Sarah and Keelan Travels, that's another one. They're really good. The Feel Good Family is really good. And the Cartwrights are another one that we've followed for a while. They all have Instagram accounts. I think they all have YouTube channels too. And then who else do we follow? Oh, the Bell family on Instagram. I'm not sure if they have a YouTube channel, but they are on Instagram. So we've kind of just watched what other people have been doing traveling around Australia. There's hundreds of Instagram accounts. You'll no doubt find one that fits with your age and stage. We're following more family oriented ones, but there are lots of single people, young couples who are traveling, and often it'll be a bit of a different style of traveling if you're traveling without kids. But yeah, like make sure you do the research and find Instagrammers who you relate to, and you can just follow along and see what they do and where they go. And that's given us a lot of inspiration for planning our trip. Um, and yeah, I think that's everything in terms of the basic trip planning. And like I said, I'll cover the more detailed trip planning in another episode. Some of the other things that have influenced our trip planning is the choice of caravan, deciding on a caravan and a vehicle and where to go. So there are a lot of places in Australia that are very remote and that require four-wheel drive vehicles and caravans, well, at least off-road caravans to be able to get to them. So that is a factor. So in terms of where you want to go, you have to think about what vehicle you're going to buy and what caravan you're going to take, so I would do some of that research really early on, because that there are limitations. There are places you just can't take caravans. There are places where you can take, like a lot of people carry around rooftop tents on top of their vehicles, so that they can go to the places. They can park up the caravan at a storage facility and then travel to places with a rooftop tent or swag tents. We haven't got as far as having a rooftop tent or swag tents yet. We may end up purchasing some swag tents so that we can get to some of the other places. But at the moment, we're trying to stick to places, well, in our planning so far at least, we're sticking to places that we can get to with our caravan. Ryan's keen to explore some of the more intrepid places, I suppose. I'm a bit more conservative, so I probably quite like to stick with the caravan, but we'll see how we go with our planning. You'll see where we get to over time. But yes, the caravan is a factor, and also that where you're going to get your caravan from and whether you want a new one or a second-hand one. We've bought a brand new caravan, and so there's a manufacturing lead time for that, and those manufacturing lead times can be quite long. So that's a factor into if you want a new caravan, where can you get it from? So where is the dealership? How long will it take them to manufacture it? And that kind of thing will factor into, where you're going to start your trip and when you can start your trip. So for us, when we decided for sure in December. Well, we had to commit to buying the caravan in December if we wanted to have it delivered in time for us to start our trip around about the middle of this year. So our caravan was ready for pickup in July. So we potentially could have left a couple of months earlier, but we in terms of our personal timing with school and work and that kind of thing, September's worked out really well for us. But yeah, factor in your caravan into your decision about where you're going to start from. The other thing too that we realized as well was that we've kind of realized, because we wanted to do a pre-trip little trip. So like we've just come back from a few weeks over in Australia planning, picking up the caravan, kitting out the caravan, and doing some of the sort of initial preparations for the trip. And so it's something that's really, we think is quite an important factor to have that planning trip, because that's given us some insight into other things we need to do to prepare. And also to test out the caravan and just sort of see what other equipment we need, and think a little bit more about our trip planning in general. So we definitely think it was worthwhile having that little sort of scouting trip and little trip away to test the caravan out and get a feel for it, and how it's all going to go. That will factor very much into our planning moving forward. We learned some important things about caravanning and making sure you get access to water and planning your road routes as well, when we did that initial trip. So that was a really good insight for us into what it's going to be like traveling with such a large caravan. Our caravan in total from Tobal to the end of the caravan is 9 meters, and it's not the easiest vehicle to maneuver around. So we learned a bit about that while we were doing this initial trip, and that will factor into our planning moving forward. So I definitely think it's worthwhile if you can doing something like that. Our plan was always to do this initial trip and then put the caravan in storage until we start our trip at the end of September. And so we were fortunate that we actually have family in Brisbane who were able to store the caravan for us, and it was so helpful having family, having somewhere to stay, having people who were able to help us out with the kids and while we were doing other things. And yeah, just having sort of like a home base while we were preparing everything was really helpful. So that's something that you could think about too if you have family in Australia or friends in Australia, someone who you're able to stay with while you're doing that initial preparation. That can make a really big difference to I think it would have been a lot harder for us at least. So I think it can make a big difference to your stress levels and make your preparation a lot easier if you do have someone who you can connect with and stay with maybe over there while you're doing that initial preparation. And like I say, there are caravan storage places around. So we had initially thought we'd put our caravan in one of those, but we're grateful, very grateful to have family who don't mind us parking our big caravan up on their lawn while we are back in New Zealand at the moment. Um, Other things, so we started planning from about a year out. So we sort of initially came up with the idea around about July 23, and it has really taken us a year to get everything planned out. I mean, we could have probably fast tracked it a little bit, but it takes a lot of work. I think we underestimated how much work it would take to get everything organized because there's so many different things. It's not just planning the trip itself. It's you're navigating the differences. So you're basically moving countries. So navigating the changes between, moving from New Zealand to Australia, opening up bank accounts, figuring out how to buy vehicles, figuring out insurances. There's a whole lot of stuff. You're sorting out our house, packing up our house at home. So we've lived in this house for 15 years now. We've accumulated a lot of stuff. So sorting through all our stuff, dropping stuff off at the op shop, putting stuff on Trade Me, selling off stuff we don't need. Figuring out what we're going to pack, what we're going to take with us, figuring out what we need to Airbnb our house. There's been a lot of planning has gone into it. So we feel like a year has been quite a good amount of time to plan for a trip like this. It's actually really more like bit more than that. It's probably more like 15, 16 months by the time we actually leave. So yeah, it probably could have been done faster than that. I mean, I'm sure it could be done faster than that if you don't have kids that you are, working around as well. But for us, owning our home, having a business, having kids, there were a lot of factors to work out. So yeah, that was a good time frame. So definitely, I think allow yourself a decent amount of time between when you come up with the idea and you actually execute upon it, so that you've got plenty of time for all of your planning.